the Lord. It's often the case that during our time of trial or tribulation, it's very difficult to look beyond the predicaments that we find ourselves in. It's as though we're trapped and fixated within the circumstances of our lives and could no longer see or notice anything else that is around us. Job, in today's first reading, was going through a severe crisis in his life, having lost pretty much everything that belonged to him. It would have been easy for him to just be overtaken by grief and lose his reason, lose his sense of awareness of everything else around him. But this is not what happens in today's reading. On the contrary, in his suffering, Job continues to be aware of the power and majesty of God. Job is aware that God is much bigger than Job. God is much greater than the mountains, the earth, the sun, and the sea, because God is their creator. God is their mover. God is their source of being. And so God can move in mysterious ways as well and be undetected, Job notices. In other words, Job still realizes that God is the one who is in control, and there's nothing that he or anyone else can do which will seize control from God, that God is ultimately the one in charge of all situations. This realization of God's supreme power and authority over all things is something that Jesus wanted to instill in his disciples, I think, which is what today's gospel sort of speaks about. The call of Jesus not to look back in certain situations of loss and sadness may seem lacking a bit of sympathy to us. But the point being made is that Jesus' disciples are meant to fixate their lives, first of all, on God, who has control over all things, and then everything else comes from that. So to be fixated on God rather than on the concerns of this world. St. Jerome, whose feast day we celebrate today, I think showed us an example of this sort of dedicated life to God, even though Jerome was not always so. As a teenager, he traveled to Rome to study grammar, philosophy, and rhetoric, but he soon lost his moral bearings and pursued pleasure instead. Eventually, with the help of good Christians, Jerome was baptized, and like Job, illness brought Jerome to a greater realization of God, to the point that he even went to live in the desert southwest of Antioch for 4 years as a hermit to concentrate on his life with God. And it was from there that by the end of his life, St. Jerome had compiled many works, with the most famous, of course, the one being his translation of the Bible from its original languages into Latin. So we pray that through the intercession of St. Jerome, we may center our lives on God, even if there should be many challenges along the way. May we always look forward to God with confidence as disciples of Jesus.